Why do strong men fall for women who end up destroying them? Why do charm, beauty, and kindness become weapons in disguise? Today, we're going to uncover the one disturbing truth about women that ancient strategy and deep psychology both understood, but modern men completely ignore. This video isn't about blame, it's about waking up. In the study of both human psychology and political behavior, there lies a single, haunting truth: what we see is rarely what we get. Nowhere is this more evident than in the relationship between man and woman. The mask, what one thinker called the persona, is not a rare deception but a daily necessity. In the realm of femininity, the mask is not only used, it is mastered. To understand the feminine mask is not to resent it, but to see it clearly, to move beyond enchantment and into sober recognition. Women have learned over centuries that raw power, especially in male-dominated structures, must be veiled to survive. Thus, manipulation evolved not as malevolence, but as adaptation. This mask, therefore, isn't just a tool, it's a form of armor. It can present itself as innocence, as fragility, as kindness. Yet underneath may lie instinct, strategy, and a sharp understanding of emotional leverage. The smile you see may be genuine in form, but it often serves a deeper, self-preserving function. It is not always a lie, but it is rarely the whole truth. This is not to say women are inherently deceptive, but that social survival taught them how to become what others wish to see. This transformation, this wearing of the psychological mask, is deeply embedded in the collective feminine psyche. Over time, it became effortless. A woman doesn't need to scheme in an obvious way to exercise influence. Her learned behavior, her emotional intuition, her subtle shifts in tone and posture are often enough to guide outcomes without direct confrontation. This is what makes the mask so difficult to detect. It is both natural and deliberate. The man unaware of this mechanism often falls for the face without questioning the intent. He believes in appearances. He is drawn to warmth, softness, and admiration. But what he doesn't see is that those traits, while possibly sincere, are often layered atop a deeper psychological structure that seeks stability, control, and advantage. And why wouldn't it? Evolution rewards those who can secure safety through charm when brute strength is unavailable. Where the man may go to war for power, the woman wins it through suggestion, emotion, and performance. Not because she is evil, but because she is observant and knows that in many domains, power is rarely handed, only taken subtly. The feminine mask is fluid. With one man, she may be submissive, with another, dominant. She adapts to the context that offers her the most psychological leverage. She reads the needs of others not intellectually but emotionally, sensing weakness, insecurity, or longing, and molds herself accordingly. The man, blinded by projection, does not see the shape shifting for what it is. He sees it as uniqueness. He believes she is that way with him alone, that her sweetness is a reflection of his value, not her strategy. And so he walks straight into the illusion. This is why men often feel betrayed, not by actions but by inconsistency. She who once admired now resents. She who once adored now ignores. But the truth is, the mask was always in motion. It simply ceased to serve its purpose. When admiration no longer benefits her, it vanishes. And because the man thought the mask was the woman herself, he interprets the shift as betrayal rather than as the end of a performance he failed to recognize. To understand the mask is not to claim that women lack depth or authenticity. On the contrary, it's to say that they, like all humans, carry within them both truth and performance. But women have historically been required to perfect the performance more than men, to survive, to gain influence, and to navigate a world that often sought to silence them. This performance, honed over generations, now exists as both a conscious tool and unconscious behavior. It has become the default mode of interaction. Charming, indirect, responsive, but also elusive, layered, and hard to penetrate. Men who seek to understand women must begin by understanding masks, not to strip them away, but to stop confusing them with the soul beneath. The failure to make this distinction leads to disillusionment, heartbreak, and submission. When a man cannot tell the difference between the persona and the person, he becomes ensnared in emotional illusions. He projects innocence onto strategy, kindness onto control, and affection onto need. And every time he does, he weakens his ability to see clearly. This is the trap. The mask behind the smile is not evil, it is brilliant. It is the culmination of centuries of adaptation. It is art, but it is not love. It is not truth. It is not what the man believes it to be. He must learn to see it as it is, not as he wishes it were. Power, in its rawest form, is rarely loud. The loudest voice in the room may get attention, but the one who shapes the conversation in silence controls the outcome. This subtle form of power, indirect, suggestive, emotional, is the realm in which women, historically and psychologically, have learned to operate with great precision. It is here that both political cunning and deep psychology intersect. Those who fail to recognize this form of control often assume they are free, even as their thoughts, decisions, and affections are being carefully guided. There is a reason why influence has always been more enduring than force. A kingdom won by war may collapse, but a mind won by seduction can be ruled forever. A woman who understands this can hold more power than a general, ever raising her voice. She may not issue commands, but her gestures, glances, and silences can move hearts, shape loyalties, and dictate outcomes. This is not accidental. It is cultivated. It is the mastery of subtlety, a form of command that disguises itself as suggestion. True feminine power lies in ambiguity. It never announces itself, never exposes its full shape, never demands recognition. Instead, it functions like a shadow, always present, always influencing, but never grabbing the spotlight. When she speaks, it is not always to express truth, but often to plant an idea, to test the waters, or to softly provoke a response that can be read and redirected. Every word becomes a tool, every silence a signal. And because this form of power operates beneath the surface, it cannot be resisted in the same way overt authority can. In relationships, this quiet authority is particularly potent. While men may believe they are leading, deciding, or protecting, they often fail to see the influence that has already shaped those very impulses. She has already predicted his reactions, already accounted for his resistance, already framed the situation in a way that directs his movement. The power does not reside in what she says, but in what he feels compelled to do in her presence. This is control without confrontation, domination without violence. Men, raised on stories of heroism and conquest, often mistake direct action for strength. They believe that to lead is to speak, to assert, to impose. And so they miss the deeper structure of influence that women employ, the ability to make others move by adjusting the emotional temperature, by suggesting rather than commanding, by withholding rather than offering. Where the masculine force attempts to conquer through presence, the feminine power conquers through absence, through the art of being just beyond reach. This is why the most powerful women are not always the loudest or the most visible. Their presence is felt more than seen. Their ability to influence others arises not from demands, but from psychological alignment. She knows when to be warm, when to be cold, when to be silent, and when to speak softly enough that the listener leans in. This draws him in further, deepens his investment, and renders him more pliable than he realizes. His ego believes he is choosing, but she has already shaped the field upon which the choices are made. Feminine power often begins where logic ends. It operates on instinct, intuition, emotion. A man may present a rational defense of his decisions, but if those decisions were made under the emotional influence of a woman who understands this power, his rationality is merely a justification after the fact. She did not need to argue, only to inspire a feeling. She need not speak of control, only to evoke a desire strong enough to override his judgment. In this way, the battlefield shifts from the external world to the internal mind. Even in broader social and political domains, this silent force has always played a role. Behind kings were queens, behind rulers were muses, behind warriors were women whose absence or presence tilted the balance of history. Their influence was often unrecorded but deeply felt. They understood that direct rule invites rebellion, but emotional influence creates loyalty. It is not fear, but fascination, that binds most men. It is not coercion, but the illusion of choice that secures obedience. Subtle power also has the advantage of plausible deniability. A woman can always claim she did not intend to influence, that she merely expressed herself. The ambiguity shields her, allowing her to operate with near invisibility. Unlike brute force, which leaves marks and memories, subtle influence leaves no fingerprints. The man who is manipulated this way cannot point to any single act of control, only to a series of decisions that slowly pulled him away from his own center. And by the time he realizes this, he has already given away his autonomy willingly. To underestimate this kind of power is not only foolish, it is dangerous. Men who fail to understand how influence works at the emotional and psychological level will continue to believe they are in control while being guided at every step. They will interpret emotional expressions as vulnerability, not recognizing that such expressions are often tactical. They will confuse softness for weakness, when in reality, it is the very form that softens resistance and gains entry where force would fail. At the core of many misunderstandings between man and woman lies a single, unsettling truth. What she seeks is not fact, but experience. It is not truth in its cold, objective form that captivates her. It is how the truth makes her feel. And if the truth is too dry, too brutal, too dispassionate, she will reject it not because it is false, but because it fails to evoke the right emotional atmosphere. This emotional logic governs her decisions, responses, and allegiances far more than the male mind typically comprehends. To the man, this may appear irrational. To her, it is survival. The masculine mind, molded by order, structure, and logic, believes that truth has an intrinsic value, that if one simply speaks it, clarity and understanding will follow. For the feminine psyche, clarity is not enough. In fact, clarity can be threatening. It reduces complexity, strips mystery, and disrupts the emotional texture that she uses to navigate the world. The truth, when spoken bluntly, can feel like a dissection. Cold, clinical, final. What she desires instead is resonance. Something that moves her, something that stirs her spirit, something that makes her feel alive. She is not necessarily lying to herself or others. She is simply aligning with the version of reality that keeps her emotionally centered. This is why many men, in their pursuit of honesty and integrity, find themselves isolated or resented. They deliver facts without sensitivity to the emotional temperature of the room. They speak truths that are dry and sharp, forgetting that she hears not only the content but the tone, the rhythm, the energy behind it. To her, a truth that does not acknowledge her emotional state is a form of violence. It is not only incorrect, it is inhuman. The man who cannot wrap his words in emotional intelligence will find that his truths fall on deaf ears, or worse, provoke silent rejection. What she seeks is not the naked structure of reality, but an emotionally satisfying interpretation of it. And in this, she becomes not a receiver of truth, but a curator of it. She chooses the version of the story that fits her feeling in the moment. Today, she may feel love and loyalty, tomorrow, distance and doubt. Each emotional state shapes her perception of the same person, the same relationship, the same past. A man may grow confused, wondering how her feelings can shift without external cause. But to her, emotion is the cause. It is both the compass and the map. This is why consistency, so valued by men, is not always present in the feminine experience. Her reality changes with her mood, because her mood is part of her reality. She is not being deceptive, she is being emotionally authentic. The problem is not that she hides the truth, that she prioritizes emotional truth over factual truth. What feels true is true, for now. The past is rewritten to match the present mood. Promises made in joy may be forgotten in sorrow. And in this emotional rewriting, the man who expects linear thinking feels betrayed. But this is not betrayal. It is a different mode of being. She relates to the world through feeling first, and logic only afterward. This doesn't mean she is illogical, but that logic must be in harmony with emotion to be valid in her eyes. If the facts contradict her emotional truth, she will defend the feeling, not because she cannot see reason, but because reason without feeling feels hollow, even hostile. She does not seek to win debates, she seeks to preserve emotional equilibrium. That is her instinct. That is her strategy. In intimate relationships, this tendency becomes even more pronounced. A man may think he is being honest when he tells her the unvarnished truth. But if the truth shatters the emotional bond or creates a sense of coldness, she will view the truth itself as the enemy and him as its heartless messenger. She may accuse him of being unloving, even if everything he said was correct, because what she ultimately wants is not the truth, but the feeling of being seen, heard, and emotionally safe. Truth that threatens that emotional safety will be rejected like poison. This is also why seduction is so powerful. It is not based on truth, but on illusion that feels emotionally rewarding. A man who creates an emotional atmosphere of strength, danger, mystery, or admiration can bypass logic entirely. He need not explain who he is in factual terms. He only needs to feel like something she craves. He becomes the story she tells herself, the symbol of a feeling she wants to experience. His emotional impact matters more than his credentials, his integrity, or even his actual intentions. Understanding this does not mean abandoning truth, but learning how to deliver it. The man who wishes to influence must become an artist, not just a truth teller. He must understand the emotional stage upon which his words fall. A harsh truth may need to be softened, a blunt fact rewrapped in emotional resonance, not to manipulate, but to translate. To speak to her in the language she truly hears, the language of feeling. Without this, the man will always feel like a stranger in her world, misunderstood and emotionally exiled, even as he clings to what he believes is right. One of the most paradoxical and misunderstood expressions of power is when it wears the mask of innocence. The more innocent a person appears, the less likely they are to be questioned, resisted, or exposed. And when that innocence is genuine in tone, but not in purpose, it becomes the most dangerous form of control. In the psychological and political arenas alike, control is rarely declared. It is suggested. It is implied through vulnerability, through fragility, through softness. And it is precisely in this quiet performance that many women hold their most unassailable leverage. The face of innocence, when unaccompanied by true power, invites sympathy. But when combined with intelligence and emotional mastery, it becomes a strategy. The soft voice, the wide eyes, the posture of dependence, all evoke protection, empathy, and lowered defenses in those around her, especially men. And in lowering their guard, they open themselves to suggestion. The innocent woman rarely needs to command, she only needs to appear harmless. Once labeled as such, she is free to maneuver through social, relational, and even political spaces without scrutiny. In every historical epoch, the archetype of the innocent woman has been used as a social weapon. She is often seen as the victim, the muse, or the moral compass. Beneath these projections lies something more complex, a psychological terrain where emotional cues are wielded like instruments. When she acts unaware, she is often gauging reactions. When she plays confused, she is testing limits. When she cries, she may be signaling more than pain. It may be a demand cloaked in despair. What she communicates emotionally is not always what she believes internally, and yet, this emotional display becomes the truth others respond to, often at their own expense. Control through innocence is rarely calculated in the rational sense. It is intuitive. It emerges from a deep instinct to avoid confrontation while still shaping the outcome. It is emotional leverage deployed with elegance. Never too much, never too little. She may not raise her voice, but she knows exactly when to become silent. She may not argue, but she knows when to look wounded. These are not mere reactions. They are psychological signals crafted to control the emotional climate of any room she enters. The more others believe she is vulnerable, the more power she gains over them. The protector becomes the controlled. This mechanism is especially effective in romantic and social relationships. A man raised to protect, serve, and respond to emotional pain will feel compelled to correct whatever is causing her discomfort. But often, the discomfort she presents is not caused by anything external. It is designed to provoke a response. Her sadness may be a message, her tears a negotiation, her silence a punishment. And yet, because it appears passive and emotional, rather than aggressive or strategic, it goes unquestioned. She remains above reproach. The power remains invisible. Even in moments of conflict, she holds the advantage. If a man raises his voice, he is seen as abusive. If she raises her voice, she is seen as emotional. If he leaves, he is heartless. If she leaves, she is self-respecting. These double standards do not arise from logic, but from archetypes deeply embedded in the collective psyche. The woman who appears innocent holds cultural immunity. Her image, even when weaponized, is shielded from criticism by centuries of myth. And it is through this myth that she can control others without them realizing they are being controlled at all. Innocence also creates plausible deniability. If her actions are ever called into question, she can retreat into confusion, hurt, or indignation. She can say she didn't mean it that way, that she was misunderstood, that she was just being emotional. And because these explanations fit the expected narrative, they are accepted. This ability to rewrite the meaning of her behavior at will makes her influence far more flexible than overt power, which must always justify itself. She has no need to justify, only to feel. This form of control is not always malicious. In many cases, it arises as a defense. A woman may learn early in life that direct expression of power brings resistance, criticism, or danger. So she adapts. She learns that if she wishes to be heard, she must appear soft. If she wishes to be followed, she must appear lost. If she wishes to lead, she must appear in need. These patterns are not taught explicitly. They are passed down through silent observation, reinforced by the rewards of social interactions. Over time, they become second nature. She forgets she is playing a role because the role itself has merged with her identity. The paradox is that her control is strongest when it appears non-existent. The moment she openly asserts it, her innocence dissolves, and with it, her influence. So she guards it carefully. She smiles while maneuvering. She reassures while manipulating. She apologizes while demanding. She maintains the illusion that she is merely reacting, when in truth, she is often setting the emotional parameters within which others react. The man who does not see this may find himself trapped in a dynamic he cannot explain. He feels compelled to serve, to protect, to agree, even when it violates his own instincts. But because her control is dressed in emotion, he doubts himself rather than her. Power that announces itself invites resistance. But power that looks like love, need, or innocence slips past all defenses. It creates loyalty, guilt, and dependency. The man who senses this dynamic but cannot name it will feel exhausted and confused. He will sense a game but see no moves. He will feel pressure but hear no commands. And in this fog he will surrender, not to her demands, but to the emotional reality she creates. The illusion that women are powerless has long been shattered, not by their rebellion, but by their mastery of subtler, more sophisticated forms of influence. Beneath the surface of innocence lies strategy. Behind emotion lies intention. And where the masculine seeks control through strength, the feminine often attains it through perception, suggestion, and the unspoken. Jung saw it in the psychological tension between anima and animus. The feminine unconscious in man, and the masculine unconscious in woman. He understood that much of what governs human interaction is not logic, but shadow, the unseen motives that drive behavior. Likewise, Machiavelli recognized the nature of power not as it is preached, but as it is practiced. He understood that the most effective rulers often never seem to rule at all. When these two perspectives meet, Jung's depth psychology and Machiavelli's political realism, they uncover a shared truth. True influence rarely declares itself. It is felt, not seen. And in the realm of male-female dynamics, this influence often flows from the woman who appears to surrender, even as she guides. From the one who cries, even as she commands. From the one who seems to need saving, while subtly shaping the very man who believes he is the savior. For the modern man, understanding this is not about distrust. It is about clarity. It is not about blame. It is about awakening. The rules have never been equal because the weapons have never been the same. And until a man sees the emotional, psychological, and symbolic ways power is expressed, he will always be vulnerable to those who wield it in silence. Only when he stops taking things at face value, when he learns to read the emotional code beneath the words, can he reclaim his sovereignty, not to overpower, but to meet her on equal ground. To see not just the woman's smile or sorrow, but the silent architecture of influence behind them. To understand that her power was never in what she said. It was in what she made him feel.